7 a.m. here in St. Louis. E-MAK Evan Makovsky with you for 2 more hours. Coming up in 1 hour, Bill McAtee will join us from New York. He called Serena's Grand Slam 4th U.S. Open title yesterday and 15th overall Grand Slam title. And what a year for her as she wins Wimbledon. She wins the Grand Slam singles and doubles, the Olympic gold singles doubles, U.S. Open singles doubles, and to me, she's entering Tiger Woods greatness type territory here, and she's the greatest female tennis player ever. I am a believer on that. So Bill McAtee will come up in an hour, and he'll talk about that as well as preview today's U.S. Open final, Novak Djokovic versus Andy Murray. Of course, though, we promised this, been waiting for this for a while. We have Joe Posnanski in the studio. He just wrote the new book, Paterno, and they are now thinking about making this into a movie. First of all, Joe, really appreciate you coming out and joining us here in the studio.
Great to be here.
Well, let's talk about this, obviously, and I do want to quickly, before we start here, mention that you are having a book signing and a talk tonight at the St. Louis County Library, 1640 South Lindbergh, across from Plaza Frontenac, at 7 o'clock tonight. Well, obviously, just talk about the curveball. I put it into words, the curveball that writing this book is, because I don't even know how to.
Yeah, curveball is probably a good, that's probably as good a description as you can come up with. Well, that was obviously very, very strange. You know, I was there in State College working on a book on Joe Paterno that I've been working on, on and off for 2 or 3 years, and then obviously the Sandusky presentment hits in November, and the entire kind of world up there blows up, and I'm in the middle of it. So it was definitely very, very strange and tough, and but it was. It was a challenge, obviously, and tried my best to live up to it. Still write, as honest a book as I could about the man's life, and I was with him quite a bit, and certainly with his family even more the last couple of months of his life when it was, obviously pretty amazing.
Was there a point, because there's been so much put on, and as you page through this book, and everybody knows and has seen, what's happened in turn, how Sandusky has gotten convicted, Paterno's passed away, but I want to focus on you for a second here. When this all went down and you're writing your biography on Joe Paterno, was there a point where you almost wanted to throw the whole script out the window and be like, how am I going to write this thing right now?
Well, I don't think I ever wanted to throw it out. I mean, I always knew I was going to write the book, but there were certainly some down moments. I mean, obviously, this is such a the story touches so many awful things. I mean, the Sandusky story is just such a human tragedy, and Paterno's involvement, non-involvement, his connection to it all is awful. But I think throughout, even when it was very, very hard, I always felt like this was an important story to tell, and so you've kind of push your way through that and keep going, and then obviously he got cancer right after, or at least discovered the cancer right after, and died in a very short period of time. So that was I've talked to other biographers, and very few of them believe that they could have gone through something like this, or they have gone through something like this. So it was tough, but I never thought about not doing it.
Joe Posnanski, the author of the new book, Paterno, out. And to be clear, this is not a documentary is not the right word, depiction of the Jerry Sandusky case. This is a biography of Joe Paterno's life, his full life, his entire life, which includes the details of what happened at the end of his life. But if people are going to the bookstore thinking that they're going to be reading about the scandal, that's not what this book's all about.
No, and I believe that there will be a book about the scandal. I mean, literally, it takes you from November 5th on through, and how everything was handled, and how things were mishandled, and how many people are involved in this. I mean, that there's a book there, but that wasn't the book that I wanted to do. I mean, I think all of the all of the facts directly involved with Paterno are in here, including a lot of the information they used in the free report, and some information they didn't. And so, I wanted to try to what I wanted to use that for was to describe him like everything else. You know, I wanted it to use to get to know who Joe Paterno was and what he was about, and try to give the reader an opportunity to make up their own decisions on those things. And you know, I've been pretty, I wouldn't say surprised, but I've been really pleased that, you know, there are a lot of people obviously who have strong feelings and they feel the book is too sympathetic to him, or they feel like it's too, there are people who also think it's too hard on him. I mean, I've heard from both, although more on the sympathetic side, I suppose. But I think that I wasn't trying to be sympathetic or non-sympathetic. I was trying to write about him as honestly as I possibly could.
Some of the reviews that have criticized your book have criticized the fact that it doesn't answer the question, how much did Joe Paterno really know involving Jerry Sandusky's behavior? And what's your response to that?
Well, you know, I think, to me, my feeling on it is anybody who criticizes the book, they have every right to do that. They have every right to their opinions on the subject. What I've come to believe, though, is a lot of the criticism, and I haven't read very much of it. I mean, I've really had a lot of it passed on to me, but I haven't read very much. A lot of the criticism comes from people who are criticizing me in the book before it ever came out. I mean, they're saying exactly the same things they said in December about me and about the book. So, and that's their right, and they have every right to do that. I think when people say it doesn't say enough about what he knew or when he knew it, what they're saying is it doesn't give them more reason to believe he knew more than he did. I mean, Joe Paterno is very much on the record in the book about what he knew when he knew it. I mean, it's very clearly in the book. I go back and as detailed as I can, try to give people the timeline of the whole situation. But I want to do it in context, and I want to let people decide for themselves. And you know, there's no smoking gun in here in that way. There's no smoking gun that said, oh, Paterno clearly knew and he clearly did this and he clearly did this. I think it's more complicated than that, and I tried to paint it as honestly as I could.
You paint a picture in the book that Joe Paterno didn't really like, which is not uncommon between co-workers, that he didn't like Jerry Sandusky that much as a person. Now, does that predate, and at what point he wanted to get rid of him? Now, is that when they were winning in the 70s and 80s? He didn't like Jerry Sandusky as well, which still, as I mentioned, happens. Or just in the 90s when he wanted Joe Paterno stopped liking him. And I'm not saying it was for any sort of
Sure.
reasons involving children. You talk about a personal dislike here.
No,
Why?
No, it's a very good question. He never liked Jerry Sandusky from the start. They're very different. They were very different people. He always thought Sandusky was a goofball. They always thought he wasn't serious. He wasn't the kind of person. He wasn't organized. So
Why'd he keep him then? If he must have liked his defensive mind.
He thought he was a very good coach. And I think that for the first 20, 25 years of the way they worked together, he didn't like him, but as you said, people work with people they don't like all the time when it's successful. When it really started taking a turn was in the early to mid 90s, when he started feeling like he wasn't doing a good job anymore. And then that dislike that he had for him, combined with the fact that he didn't think he was recruiting anymore, didn't think he was coaching anymore, he made numerous efforts to kind of reassign him, try to get him to go somewhere else, try to get him to do different things. And that all predated 98. And I really believe that had nothing to do with Sandusky's criminal behavior or anything like that. I believe that he just didn't think he was coaching anymore.
All right, we have one segment here, so I'm going to whip through a couple topics with you. Do you believe the Free report that he sort of, Louis Free, had a goal, sort of a witch hunt to get Joe Paterno in this report, and that he did that, and how much stock do you put into the Free report? Yeah,
well, I think they're two different things. I much in the same way that I'm trying not to make judgments about Paterno, I'm not going to make judgments about what I think the motivations of the Free report are. But the second question, do I believe the Free report? I think the Free report is very incomplete. I don't think they talked to almost anybody directly involved in this, and I think they've made some assumptions that, honestly, I wouldn't have made. I mean, it's based on some of these emails that I include in the book.
Can you give an example on the air?
Well, yeah, I think, for instance, he says in 2001, Tim Curley, who was the athletic director at the time, sent an email that said after talking about this with Joe, or after thinking about this and talking it over with Joe, I decided blah, 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 blah. Well, that is the single email everybody's used to believe that Joe Paterno told them not to press on with Jerry Sandusky. I think that's an unbelievable leap of faith, and frankly, I think if you read the email, I've read it hundreds of times, I don't see how you get that. I mean, I think you have to go in kind of, unless they have corroborating evidence that they didn't include, I don't see how you can read the email that way. To me, I read the email saying he discussed it, he had a conversation with Joe Paterno, we have no idea what they talked about, and he came out of it and he said, I made this decision, I think, and it doesn't make sense to me, and I honestly believe, from what I've been able to tell and what I've heard, that Tim Curley's going to say that's not the way the email was written. And so when you don't talk to Tim Curley and you don't ask him what he meant by this kind of email, you could make those kind of assumptions. But when Tim Curley comes out and says, no, that's not what the email said, it's not what I meant for it to say, I talked about it with Joe, I didn't give him any details or whatever he's going to say, I think you have a very different story, and one that's a little tougher to jump to conclusions about.
Last couple of minutes here with Joe Posnanski. He wrote the book Paterno, and we are discussing that they're talking about making a movie based on your book starring Al Pacino. Do you like that character? As Joe Paterno.
As
by
Joe
the way.
Paterno, I know so little. It's so funny. My mother called me to tell me that this had broken on the news. I'd heard Al Pacino read the book. I knew that, and I knew that he really liked it, and I knew he wanted to be attached to it, and he really wanted to play Paterno. But I didn't fully know that it was going to blow up kind of the way it did over the weekend. I think he'd be a great Paterno if it should come to that, but we're a million miles away from that.
I want to make these last couple questions about you here, and it's just an opinion. How much do you believe Joe Paterno knew regarding the children? And just how much do you believe? I'm not saying you're speaking the fact or the gospel, just your opinion, being closer to the situation than most people. Do you believe that Joe Paterno knew the depths of what was going on with Jerry Sandusky?
I will be speaking my opinion entirely, because I really, what I wanted to do in this book is not get in the way of that and letting the reader make their own mind up. I don't believe he knew the depths of it, certainly. I don't believe he went that deep into it at all. I think he had an inkling of what was going on. I think the 2001 case where Mike McQuarrie, the graduate assistant at the time, goes to and tells him the story, I think it's very, very shaky. I don't know what he was told in there. I think that there are a lot of questions about that. For me, after having spent a lot of time with him, I don't think he knew certainly the depths of it. But at the same time, there was enough smoke here that I think a younger, more vigilant Joe Paterno would have been more vigilant.
Do you believe that younger, that this story that he was, what, if he was too old, then maybe he shouldn't have been coaching the team, if you're going to use that argument.
Well, I believe that, yeah.
You do believe that he shouldn't have been coaching the team?
I think he should have retired a lot earlier.
Okay, that's fine. So you have that. But wouldn't you think, though, and this is where I think people's problem is, that even if he didn't know what was going on, but you start hearing, it's not like this guy's shoplifting or even this guy's doing drugs on the team, where it should be addressed, but okay, if you look the other way, nobody's going to... This is kind of serious stuff. They supposedly had an office next to each other. Hey, Jerry, at one point, wouldn't he just knock on the door and say, hey, Jerry, I heard this. What about this? How come that was never said?
Well,
or allegedly.
Well, for some reasons, he didn't have an office next door to him. I mean, that's not true. Not after all of these incidents happened. He wasn't working for him anymore.
Right. But he had a key to the facilities, Jerry Sandusky.
He had a key to facilities. I honestly believe, I mean, having lived in State College and having seen the logistics of it, he didn't run into Jerry Sandusky very often, if at all. I mean, he would probably have gone years without seeing Jerry Sandusky. I know that Sandusky would show up at games so often, and supposedly there were some practice things, although I've heard from others that that's not true. But he didn't run into him very often. He was not friends with him. He didn't have any social connection with him. I think that the question you're asking is not unfair. I mean, I think, again, should Joe Paterno have followed up? Yes. But lots and lots and lots of other people didn't follow up here, and I think we all point at him. There was somebody who supposedly saw the incident who didn't follow up. There was the police that was aware of the 98 incident, and they closed it without any charges being drawn at all. There's Child Services that was made aware of this thing in 98. They didn't follow up at all. There's Second Mile, the charity that he worked for. They were told about this incident. Nobody's arguing that point. They didn't follow up. I mean, this is pretty widespread, and I think so much of the attention has gone on to Joe Paterno, who is an older man coaching his football team, and he deserves some of that. But for all of that attention. He was not the mayor of the town. He was not the police chief. I mean, he was a football coach, and I wish he had done more. I think he wished he had done more. But I think so much of the attention has just gone to, like, somehow Joe Paterno was the sheriff and should have put an end to this. A lot of people should have put an end to this.
All right, finally, Joe Posnanski, author of Paterno. Fine. Last year, a week before he gets arrested, Jerry Sandusky is in a Penn State suite at a football game. Spanier, Curley, Paterno, they've all given grand jury testimony. How does he still have access to the facilities then? I'm not even blaming this squarely on Joe Paterno. I'm blaming this on everybody. So now everybody knows, all the people, the higher ups know, and he's still at the game. What is the possible in the universe explanation of that after they've given their grand jury testimony?
No possible explanation. I have no idea why they didn't cut ties with him long before that, especially with the grand jury testimony. Now, they would say later that they were really hijacked when they didn't, even though they gave grand jury testimony, they were not told what he was being charged with. They were not told how bad it was. They were not told any of these things. But I'm not defending that. I'm not defending them. They should never have allowed Joe Paterno anywhere near the.
You mean Sandusky?
Jerry Sandusky near the game. They never should have. They should have cut ties with him long before.
All right. Before we let you go here, I guess if you had to put a summary on this book here, because I would think some people, I have walked by some people as I've been reading this, and they said, "Oh, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that." Just, I guess, judging a book by its cover, so to speak, literally. What would you say to those people?
I think if somebody's not interested in it, they shouldn't get the book. I mean, I'm not here trying to shove this down anybody's throat. There are a lot of people who are interested in him, what he's about, what this story was about, trying to get at the heart of how this happened, why this happened, but also get the heart of who the man is in the middle of it. And for those people, I honestly believe that I've given them a good story here and something to read. And obviously there have been a lot of people who have bought the book. I mean, it was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. So I've been proud of that and happy about that. But I've said from the start, this is a very difficult and emotional story, and I don't blame people if they don't want to read it. I understand that.
And you will be tonight at the St. Louis County Library, 1640 South Lindbergh, right across the street from Plaza Frontenac, 7 o'clock, doing a book signing.
I'll be there.
Joe, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much for coming in. People obviously can get the book everywhere, Amazon, you name it, online, local bookstore, library. It's available everywhere. Author of Paterno, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll take a break, come back. Your calls, 969-1380, toll free 800-491-1380.